This episode of Talent Development Leader Podcast is sponsored by Vim and Vibe. Modern learners are on the go, and they want short video chunks that are entertaining and have emotional hooks. Vim and Vibe Productions is a woman-owned video production and instructional design studio specializing in video microlearning that will not bust your budget. Learn more at vimandvibe.com. Welcome to ATD's Talent Development Leader Podcast, featuring monthly conversations with the greatest influencers in the talent development field. We cover the latest trends, hot topics, and future-focused ideas that current and aspiring TD leaders need to know. Learn more by visiting www.td.org and searching for Talent Development Leader Podcast. Tonika Quick is a loving wife, mother, grandmother, and daughter, a Girl Scout troop leader, entrepreneur running several small businesses, director of a nonprofit, and one of a growing number of Black female corporate VPs for the largest gaming and hospitality company in the U.S. These are some of the many roles Tonika plays on a daily basis. For nearly 20 years, Tonika has worked in talent development, where she has been able to live within her passion of working with people, helping them to develop individualized growth plans and watching them achieve their personal and professional goals. She often describes herself as an operations leader, having spent the early years of her career in hotel operations, learning the value of understanding the customer, internal and external, handling difficult situations, and developing creative solutions. In 2021, Tonika was promoted to her dream role of Enterprise VP of Talent Development for Caesars Entertainment, a role that had remained vacant for several years following a transition. She has been given a blank slate to design the future of talent for Caesars Entertainment, and she is sharpening her pencils. Hi, Tonika. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you. Hearing that aloud is like pretty exciting.
I bet. And wow, a blank slate to design the future of talent at Caesars. So I can imagine that some of our listeners are feeling a little envious of you today, hearing that.
But they should be.
Yeah, what
it's
a cool
good position
job.
to be in.
They're probably mostly intrigued, though, and fascinated by what they might be able to learn from you. So I'm super excited that we have you on our podcast today. And I'd like to get started and kind of set some context for our conversation. In October of 2023, you were spotlighted in 2 articles in Talent Development Leader.
Yes.
And I'd like to kind of dig into those in which you and your learning organization at Caesars are featured to better understand your career progression and the lessons that you've learned along the way. And I know, as I said, our audience of current and aspiring TD leaders can learn a lot from your journey. So one of the articles, called Betting on TD, you divulge, during her years working in L&D on site at various Caesars properties, Quick realized that she did not understand the corporate perspective. It became a personal goal to earn a corporate position in TD leadership so she could better understand the reasoning behind certain decisions. What's more, Quick made it her mission to bring the on-site team members' perspectives to headquarters so she could make practical improvements to L&D. I'd love to hear, what did you learn about the corporate perspective that you could share with TD leaders? What insights do you think might be helpful for them as far as how to speak the language of the business? And how did you bring an L&D perspective into your new role?
Yeah, it was actually really interesting. I think one of my biggest learning time was position and education is just scratching the surface. During my first stint in my corporate role, I found that there was an amazing group of highly intelligent, capable L&D professionals who had never worked in operations and didn't understand the operations. So many of the decisions that were made in a vacuum. Although I didn't make a lot of friends during that stint, I believe I added value by providing a perspective that the group hadn't considered. So as I think about, understanding business, get all up in the business. That's where I am. You don't have to have worked in the operations, but it's about getting out and understanding who they are. Of course, we want to make sure that we understand financial acumen. People want engagement as long as it helps the business, as long as we can demonstrate value. But one of the most important things that we can do is understand what the world looks like from the point of view of the people who are doing the work. What are their challenges and issues? What programs are going to be of value to them? If I implement this process or go this direction, what would it take for them to execute that? Like that's the business language that I try to master, the language of operations and the things that are going to be important to them.
I appreciate that. I often, even in my job or role, trying to think about what does my boss, what does my CEO care about, right?
Same thing. Yeah. It's our internal customers, and that's what it's like. Think about the customer first and not, yes, they were wicked smart group of people, by all means, they can quote all of the articles and white papers and, they can do all of that, but none of that means anything if it's not sensitive to what it takes to execute in the business.
Just curious, from your career in L&D and what you've experienced, people you've worked with, do you think there's a lack of that perspective or that ability to kind of get into the business? Where do you see the field currently and maybe where is it going?
I don't think there's a lack of it. I think there's a lack of appreciation for it. Oftentimes the business dictates for us to deliver quickly, to turn over results quickly. And it takes time to get in and understand the business. And we tend to be reactive to what they're asking for rather than proactively making sure that we're delivering upon what they need. And I think that that's a difference, is just making sure that, it takes a lot of strength to tell some of your senior leaders, no, or not right now, let's talk about this a little bit more so that I have an understanding, can deliver for you.
I talk to executives in talent development quite a bit, and I often hear that one of the secrets to success in leading learning in an organization is to be a business person first and a learning person second. This is really in line with what you're sharing, right? So they talk about skills like strategic thinking, problem solving, systems thinking, critical analysis, some of the most important capabilities that someone can have at a senior leader executive level. And it sounds like you've developed this mindset and skill set throughout your career. And what's more, reading the articles about you in Talent Development Leader, you seem to have an exceptional ability to influence, to gather input, to see what your stakeholders' pain points might be, think critically about what their real learning needs are, as you said, and then deliver the solutions that will alleviate those challenges. In the article, Always Give Them What They Need, you say, information the talent development team gathers gives us the knowledge and power to respond in a smart way to those requests. That's why I have this saying, I might not give people what they ask for, but I always give them what they need. I love that so much. And can you talk more about how you develop that mindset, those secrets to success in your role and kind of the corresponding skills?
And I think it really starts with me being naturally an introvert. As an introvert, I've always been accustomed to kind of blending in and listening. And that puts me in position to hear and understand both what's being said and what's not being said. So I don't enter any situation with answers or assumptions. Sometimes, they call and they say, I want coaching for this leadership group. So I don't go in saying, okay, let me figure out how I can create coaching. I go in and I try to understand, what are they talking about? Like, what's going on? What do they need? How are they identifying those challenges? So it's about getting an understanding by listening, by asking questions, and at the end of that, sometimes the answer is yes. You do the training that they ask for. Many times the answer is no, either that there's no training that's needed or not the type of training that you're asking for. But here are some other things that, we can talk about on how do we help you reach the goal? What are the actions or activities that help you to be able to accomplish the results that you're looking for? And so it starts with, like, for me, it's just mostly listening. I enter a room with an open mind and let me hear what's going on and, asking those clarifying questions to understand what the real issue is, because training is always the first, always the first question, request. Most of the time, I don't find that to be the answer.
Some really good problem solving right there,
It really
and
is.
kind of a consultant mindset, right? I do think L&D tends to be more reactive, and I appreciate that proactivity that you're talking about. And as you mentioned, sometimes probably get some pushback from people, right? If they
Oh,
don't
yeah.
appreciate the answer, but knowing what the business need is and how to push performance toward that might not always be training. So yeah.
And I appreciate that you refer to it as a consulting mindset, because that's absolutely what it is. I think oftentimes we believe we work for the business. So it's about reacting and do what the business asks asks you to do. It's about delivering what they're asking for. But I think one of the worst things we can do is simply do what they ask and not receive the desired results. Because now your credibility, because Tonika's coaching class didn't work. That program wasn't successful. Well, no, because it wasn't intended to be successful, because that wasn't the problem. That wasn't the solution for the problem. So we do have to enter it, even from a large corporation or organization. Yeah, you have to approach the situation using the lens of a consultant.
And I think, also you and your team are kind of on the line there, right? So if you're not delivering what they actually need, that's, as you said, might come back to you.
Absolutely.
And maybe it's about retraining the business to be able to understand, the process you're going through to assess needs and so on and so forth. Yeah, which probably takes time, I would imagine.
It really is. And so during the introduction, you mentioned how I was promoted into this role just a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And in that, we were a new company. It was a new company, new leadership, new direction, due to an acquisition from another company. So that's where that blank slate came in. And with that, there was some learning, because culturally, the way that people worked with human resources and talent teams was simply that, here's my list of asks. Now let's go out and do those things. And so it has been a good, lesson for the business and operations, and being patient, taking the time to understand who are we as an organization? Who do we want to be? And then what are the things that are going to help us to get there? And that was not doing a slew of training classes coming out of the gate. That wasn't going to be effective for us.
Your team is very focused on assessing its own performance, which I think is really cool. You talk about stop to observe performance meetings, mm-hmm. and you ensure you're continuously delivering the right mix of learning solutions for the organization. I find TD leaders are often so focused on skill and career development for others, right? That's their job. That's their job. But within that, then they neglect their own professional development or their team's professional development. It's kind of just what kind of falls out or shakes out. So how do you practically prioritize the development of your L&D team?
Well, with this one, you actually did find my Achilles heel. This is an area that I don't do very well. Naturally, I tend to be more task driven. I'm focused on programs and processes, business outcomes, and I lose sight of the people. But what's worked really well for me, especially in this current role, is my ability to trust the team to manage those programs, process, and business, those outcomes. That's allowed me to develop myself in the area of relationship, to better understand their needs, desires. So still using that same consultative, personality, where I'm able to understand what do they need and how can I continue to grow their development. So that is one that I'm still working on, still actively working on. But I think a big part of that starts with trusting the team to manage the business and the operation, so that I can focus on hearing them and assessing what their specific needs are.
And it sounds like you've been, getting into Caesars with that blank slate, kind of building a team, right? It seems like a beautiful moment for you and your function and what you can do, even culturally there, I would imagine.
Yeah, we've been able to retain about 90% of my staff since we moved into this role. And, a good part of that is that blank slate, where we get to do some really exciting projects and, really be able to see the impact on the business, on a regular basis. Not that you're picking up something that other people have done, but, starting from the beginning, from the ground up.
I'd love to hear from you, Tonika, about your own personal leadership philosophy, maybe something you've developed while at Caesars or even coming into that role and have honed along your journey there.
Yeah. And you probably picked up on some of this, as I was talking, but my philosophy is simply people first. When we enter a room, when we start a new role, when we join any organization, we're not cogs in the system, we're people. So when we put their feelings, their thoughts, their needs, their voices first, everything else falls in line. So it's about understanding the people who you work with and who you're supporting.
You have a lot of passion around the role of sponsors in career progression.
Yes.
And certainly this is a big component of leadership, right? Looking out for where you're going in your career, where your people are growing in their careers. And you said in one of your articles, along my career, sponsors provided coaching and polishing. They gave me the direction to grow my career, to be able to even see what a career was. Did you seek those sponsors out, or did they seek you out? And what advice would you give to listeners who are looking for similar advocates within their professional circles?
Yeah, that it's interesting because it happened pretty organically. Yeah, I certainly didn't reach out to them. There wasn't the language around sponsors during that time. And so I didn't know that I could. I didn't know that was a thing. There was, it was almost like needing permission to, because I just didn't realize that was a thing. And on their side, two people specifically who, I absolutely love and adore and accredit a lot of this too. I don't think they considered themselves sponsors. I tease and I say they just saw this dusty young lady, with a lot of potential, who spoke confidently about ruling the world one day. And, they saw the potential in the work and, they provided the guidance. They knocked down the barriers and, genuinely looked out for me. And so as I think about, now that the language around sponsorship is more widely and actively used, and we understand the impact of sponsorship, I encourage people to seek them out. Go and find that person, who you identify, who you trust, and ask them for the tough feedback. That's the thing. Ask them for the tough feedback. And as they give that to you, accept that feedback as a gift, put in the work, and put them in position to advocate and fight for you. Because that's where the sweet spot is. You want to make sure that they're not going to just sell, there's no entitlement here. They're not going to, spread your name and talk to you in those rooms unless they believe in you. And that's what you want to do. Put them in position so that they can fight for you.
Gosh, feedback can be scary, can't it? It's like sometimes before I ask for it, I'm like putting on my armor, like, okay, I'm ready. I got this.
Be careful what you ask for, right?
Right.
But it really is a gift. And, do with that feedback what you choose. But let's get that feedback and understand what are my opportunities and, those rooms that I don't get the chance to go into. Give me those, tell me about that. What's happening in there? What are their expectations? That's the best way to be able to receive it is through that feedback.
I also think, how else are you going to grow? And how else are you going to grow your team or your org unless you're uncovering your own blind spots, getting a little uncomfortable, right? Which typically happens with some honest feedback. So yeah, that's excellent advice.
Thank you.
So before we wrap up today, Tonika, any kind of closing thoughts for listeners, perhaps about what you've recently learned, something maybe an epiphany or an aha that you're still mulling over, or really when you think about our TD Leader audience, what you might want to charge them with as we wrap up today.
Yeah, I think about saying yes. Being open. When I started with Caesars Entertainment 23 years ago, I didn't know this role existed. And so I wasn't working towards being here. And it took people tapped me on the shoulder and saying, hey, would you be interested in? And I said, okay, I'll go and find out, and it gave me the opportunity to explore myself, explore what my capabilities were, explore what I did not want to do and where I did not want to be. But just being open and saying yes. And that's something that, not only in my professional career, but I've taken that into my personal life too. I shared I'm an introvert. So oftentimes I prefer being on the couch. Say yes, go out, meet those people and enjoy the wine. Like, just say yes.
Great. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Please tell listeners how they might connect with you to ask any of their own questions or continue the conversation.
LinkedIn would be the best way to contact with me. Luckily, my name is Tonika Quick. There are not very many Tonikas, and there certainly isn't another Tonika Quick in there. But I check it often, and I've made lots of new friends on LinkedIn and always respond.
Cool. Well, thank you for being with us today. Listeners, you can learn more from Tonika in her featured TD Leader articles called Betting on TD and Always Give Them What They Need. And both are on www.td.org/TDL. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast by the Association for Talent Development. If you found this show insightful or useful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with a colleague.